Game shows are supposed to reward knowledge, skill, and quick thinking. Sometimes they reward people who have absolutely no idea what they're doing, but get incredibly lucky. 1. A contestant on Who Wants to Be a Millionaire reached the final question worth $1 million without using any lifelines. The question was extremely difficult, asking about an obscure historical fact. The contestant admitted on air that he had absolutely no idea what the answer was. He said, "I've come this far, I'm just going to guess." He had 4 options and randomly chose C without any reasoning. The answer was correct. He won $1 million by admitting he was completely guessing on national television. Host Regis Philbin was visibly shocked that a pure guess on the $1 million question had worked. The contestant later admitted in interviews that he'd never heard of the historical event referenced in the question and truly had just picked a letter at random. His honesty about not knowing the answer made his win both memorable and absurd. The odds of randomly guessing the final millionaire question correctly are 25%, and he beat those odds to become a millionaire by admitting he had no idea what he was doing. 2. A contestant on Wheel of Fortune was playing a puzzle with only a few letters revealed. The category was Thing, and only the letters Rs and As were showing. It was her turn and she had no idea what the word could be. She randomly guessed the letter E, which wasn't in the puzzle. Then her opponent also guessed wrong. Then the third contestant guessed wrong. It came back to her turn and she decided to solve the puzzle even though she only had 4 letters and no idea what it was. She blurted out pine as a complete guess. The answer was pine, a 4-letter word in the Thing category. She'd solved the puzzle with minimal letters showing by pure luck. Pat Sajak looked amazed that she'd solved it so quickly with so little information. She won that round and eventually won the game. Her solving became famous among Wheel of Fortune fans as one of the luckiest guesses in the show's history, because pine is not an obvious answer with only those letter positions revealed. 3. A contestant on Jeopardy was in 3rd place going into Final Jeopardy with almost no chance of winning. The category was classical music, which none of the contestants seemed to know well. All 3 contestants wrote answers for the final question. When revealed, the first-place contestant had written a completely wrong answer and wagered everything, dropping to $0. The second-place contestant had also written a wrong answer and wagered too much, dropping below the third-place contestant's total. The third-place contestant had written, "Who is Mozart?" which was wrong, but he'd wagered so little that his wrong answer still left him with more money than the other 2 contestants who'd wagered poorly. He won Jeopardy by getting Final Jeopardy wrong because both opponents had bet unwisely and also answered incorrectly. Alex Trebek noted that the winner had advanced not by getting the answer right, but by betting smart while everyone got it wrong. The contestant admitted he'd just written Mozart because it was the only classical composer he could think of, and hadn't expected to win with a wrong answer. 4. A contestant on The Price is Right was playing Plinko, which is pure luck. You drop chips down a board and they randomly land in money slots. The contestant had no strategy and just dropped all 5 chips without thinking about placement. All 5 chips randomly landed in the $10,000 slot, the center slot that's statistically hardest to hit. She won $50,000 by pure random chance on a game that requires 0 skill. Bob Barker was amazed, saying he'd never seen all 5 chips land in the $10,000 slot in all his years hosting. The contestant kept screaming, "I don't know what I'm doing," as each chip miraculously landed in the center. Her Plinko performance became legendary because the odds of all 5 chips landing in the same slot, especially the center one, are astronomically low. She'd won $50,000 through sheer dumb luck on a game where skill is impossible. 5. A contestant on Family Feud was asked, "Name something you'd find in a kitchen." It's an easy question with dozens of correct answers. The contestant froze and panicked. After a long pause, he blurted out, "Wife!" The host and audience laughed because it was an absurd answer. But then the board revealed that wife was actually the number 7 answer with 4 points. Apparently 4 survey respondents had said wife when asked what you'd find in a kitchen. The contestant's ridiculous panic answer had somehow been on the board. His family went on to win the round partly because of his absurd answer that happened to be correct. The moment became a viral video because of how unexpected and dated the answer was. He'd won points by saying something completely stupid that happened to match what a few survey respondents had said decades ago when the survey was taken. 6. A contestant on Deal or No Deal kept rejecting reasonable offers from the banker and making terrible strategic decisions. She eliminated cases randomly without any pattern or thought. Through pure luck, she kept eliminating low-value cases while high-value cases remained. Despite having no strategy whatsoever, the random case eliminations worked in her favor. The banker kept increasing offers, but she kept saying no deal without reasoning. Finally, she went to the end, and her case contained $500,000. She'd won $500,000 by completely ignoring all logic and strategy, making random choices that happened to work out. Howie Mandel told her she'd made some of the worst strategic decisions he'd ever seen but had gotten incredibly lucky. She admitted she'd just been picking cases based on which numbers felt good, with no actual strategy. Her terrible decision-making had been rewarded with a massive prize through pure chance. 7. A contestant on Wheel of Fortune had a puzzle with most of the letters revealed. A streetcar named Desire. This is a famous play and movie, but the contestant had apparently never heard of it. On her turn, she guessed the letter K, which obviously wasn't in the puzzle since all the letters were already visible. Her opponents both spun and also guessed wrong letters somehow. It came back to her and she decided to solve, but she apparently couldn't read what was clearly written on the board. She said, "A streetcar named Deceit?" The answer was wrong. Her next opponent also guessed wrong. The third contestant tried to solve and said, "A streetcar named Design," which was also wrong. It came back to the first contestant who looked at the board again and correctly read, "A streetcar named Desire," winning the round. She'd won by eventually reading what was on the board after multiple wrong solves. Pat Sajak joked that they should teach literacy on the show. She won the puzzle not through knowledge of the famous play, but by finally correctly reading the letters that were already revealed. 8. A contestant on Who Wants to Be a Millionaire used the Ask the Audience lifeline on a relatively easy question about geography. The audience voted and 60% chose answer B. The contestant said, "I actually think the answer is C, but the audience usually knows." She went against the audience and chose C, her own answer. C was correct. The audience had been 60% wrong. She won that round by ignoring her lifeline and going with her gut. Later in the game, she used Phone a Friend, and the friend gave confidently wrong advice. She again ignored the lifeline and went with her own answer, which was correct. She kept winning by using lifelines and then ignoring them. She eventually won $250,000 by consistently not trusting her lifelines and going with her own instincts. Her strategy of wasting lifelines and then disregarding them was terrible game theory, but happened to work because her instincts were better than her helps. 9. A contestant on The Price is Right was playing the Showcase Showdown, where you spin a wheel to get closest to $1 without going over. His first spin landed on $0.35. His second spin needed to get him to $1 or close to it. He spun hard, and the wheel went around multiple times before slowly landing on exactly 0.65, giving him a perfect 1.0 wow. Bob Barker went crazy because a perfect dollar is rare and wins a $1,000 bonus. But then it got dumber. The contestant had to spin one more time, and if he got another $1 free, he'd win $10,000. The odds of this are astronomical. He spun and through incredible luck, the wheel again landed on $1 Ouriao, meaning he'd spun 0.35, 0.65, and then Wawan Roller in 3 consecutive spins. He won $11,000 through impossible luck. The audience lost their minds. Bob Barker said in 30-plus years of hosting, he'd never seen it happen. The contestant had no skill in the spins, just absurd probability-defying luck. 10. A contestant on Jeopardy buzzed in on a question about ancient Rome. The question was, this Roman emperor was known for? And before Alex Trebek could finish reading the clue, the contestant buzzed in and yelled, "Who is Caligula?" Alex hadn't finished the question yet. Normally buzzing in early and answering before the question is complete would be wrong, but by pure chance the question was indeed about Caligula. The contestant had buzzed in early, not even heard the full question, guessed a random Roman emperor, and happened to be right. Alex was stunned that an early random guess had worked. The contestant admitted he'd panicked when he heard Roman emperor and just named the first emperor he could think of. His impulsive early buzz-in with a random guess had worked through pure luck. 11. A contestant on Family Feud was asked, "Name a famous person named George." The contestant completely blanked, and after a long, awkward pause said, "George Washington Carver?" Host Steve Harvey looked confused, because George Washington Carver is a real person, but not usually what people think of when asked for a famous George. The board revealed that George Washington Carver was actually the number 6 answer. A few survey respondents had given the full 3-name response instead of just George Washington. The contestant's confused combination answer had accidentally matched a survey response. His family won the round partly due to his panicked 3-name answer. The clip went viral because of how weird the answer was and how surprised everyone was that it was on the board. 12. A contestant on Wheel of Fortune had a puzzle in the before and after category showing self-help, with several letters already revealed. The answer was clearly self-help group or self-help books. On her turn, she said, "I'd like to solve self-help Cupid." This made no sense and wasn't a valid before and after phrase. Pat Sajak said, "That's incorrect." Her opponent then solved it correctly as self-help group. But then production stopped the game because they'd reviewed the board and realized that with the letters that were showing, Cupid could have technically fit, even though it made no grammatical sense. The contestant was given credit for the solve despite it being nonsensical. She won that round with an answer that didn't make logical sense, but technically could have fit the letter spaces. Her meaningless answer had accidentally qualified on a technicality. 13. A contestant on The Price is Right was playing a pricing game where she had to guess the price of a car. She was given a starting price of $28,000 and had to guess higher or lower. The actual price was $32,567. She should have guessed higher, but she confidently said lower, which was clearly wrong. There was no way the car cost less than $28,000. But just as she said it, there was a technical glitch and the display board malfunctioned, freezing. Production stopped the game, and when they restarted, they decided to give her another chance and let her guess again. This time she guessed higher and won the car. She'd won by making a terrible guess that was interrupted by a technical error, getting a do-over, and then guessing correctly. Bob Barker joked that the gods of game shows had given her a second chance. Her wrong answer had been saved by equipment failure. 14. A contestant on Jeopardy was performing terribly, getting almost every answer wrong and having negative dollars at one point. Going into Final Jeopardy, he had only $400 compared to the leader's $18,000. The Final Jeopardy category was science, and all 3 contestants clearly had no idea what the answer was. When answers were revealed, both top contestants had wagered everything and written completely wrong answers, dropping to $0. The last place contestant had written, "What is photosynthesis?" which was also completely wrong, but he'd only wagered $1, leaving him with $399. He won Jeopardy with $390, one of the lowest winning scores ever, by being less wrong than his opponents who'd bet foolishly. Alex Trebek said it was a win by default if there ever was one. The contestant admitted he'd just written a random science word and couldn't believe he'd won while getting the answer wrong. 15. A contestant on Who Wants to Be a Millionaire reached a $250,000 question and said, "I have absolutely no idea. I'm going to use my 50-50. The lifeline eliminated 2 wrong answers, leaving 2 options. She said, "I still have no idea. Both of these sound equally likely. I'm just going to pick A." She chose A with no reasoning whatsoever. A was correct. She won $250,000 on a pure random guess between 2 options. Regis asked, "Did you have any idea?" And she said, "Not even a little bit. I literally just picked one." She decided to walk away with $250,000 rather than guess on the $500,000 question. Her honest admission that she'd won $250,000 by flipping a mental coin made her win both lucky and absurd. 16. A contestant on Wheel of Fortune was playing a puzzle that had almost no letters revealed yet. It was early in the round with maybe 3 letters showing out of 20+ letter spaces. It was her turn, and instead of calling a letter, she randomly decided to solve the entire puzzle with almost nothing showing. She said, "I'd like to solve The Wonderful Wizard of Oz." Everyone assumed she'd be wrong, because solving with so few letters is nearly impossible. But incredibly, she was right. Pat Sajak was shocked that she'd solved it so early. She said, "I just had a feeling," and admitted she'd just guessed based on the category and the few letters showing. Her improbable early solve worked through incredible intuition or luck. She won that round and the bonus round, taking home over $50,000 by solving a puzzle that seemed unsolvable with the information available. 17. A contestant on The Price is Right was playing the Showcase Showdown. His showcase included a car, a trip, and furniture totaling $28,450 in actual retail price. He was supposed to bid on his showcase without going over. When asked for his bid, he said $28,450, the exact price to the dollar. This is virtually impossible to guess exactly. The audience went insane. Bob Barker was stunned. The contestant had either made the luckiest guess in game show history or had somehow calculated the exact price. He won both showcases because of his perfect bid. Later, it was investigated whether he'd cheated, but no evidence of cheating was found. The contestant maintained he'd just estimated and gotten incredibly lucky. His exact to the dollar bid remained one of the most suspicious and amazing moments in Price is Right history. 18. A contestant on Family Feud was asked, "Name something people do when they can't sleep." The contestant said masturbate. Steve Harvey's face was priceless as the audience gasped. It was an absurdly inappropriate answer on a family show. But then the board revealed that sex masturbate was actually the Nebra 4 answer with 11 points. Apparently 11 survey respondents had given that answer. The contestant's shocking answer had been on the board. His family won the round partly because of his mortifying answer. Steve Harvey couldn't stop laughing, and the clip became a viral sensation. The contestant had won points by saying something that shouldn't have been said on family television, but happened to match what survey respondents had honestly answered. 19. A contestant on Who Wants to Be a Millionaire reached the $500,000 question. The question was about obscure geography. She said, "I have no idea. I'm going to use my phone a friend." She called her friend who also had no idea. The friend said, "I'm just going to guess. See?" The contestant said, "Well, I don't know either, so I might as well go with your guess." She locked in C based on her friend's random guess. C was correct. She won $500,000 because both she and her friend randomly guessed the same wrong-sounding answer that happened to be right. She walked away with the money rather than risk the million. Her $500,000 win was based entirely on both she and her friend making the same random guess. 20. A contestant on Jeopardy buzzed in on a question and gave an answer that was completely wrong, not even close to what was being asked. Alex Trebek said, "No, I'm sorry," but then production halted the game because judges needed to review something. After several minutes, they announced that while the contestant's answer was wrong for the question asked, there had been a misprint on the clue, and the contestant's answer would have been correct for what the question was supposed to say. They gave him credit for the answer, even though he'd answered a question that wasn't actually asked. His wrong answer to the wrong question had become right when the question was corrected. He went on to win that game partly because of the bizarre reversal. 21. A contestant on Wheel of Fortune was playing a puzzle with the category phrase. The puzzle showed, with no letters revealed yet. On her first turn before calling any letters, she said, "I'd like to solve." Pat Sajak looked confused because there were 0 letters showing. She said, "Practice makes perfect," with absolutely no information to base it on. Incredibly, she was correct. She'd solved a puzzle with no letters revealed by pure guessing of a common phrase. Pat was amazed and asked, "How did you know that?" She said, "I don't know, I just thought of a random phrase and said it." Her impossible solve with 0 information won her that round. The odds of randomly guessing a specific phrase with no letters are essentially zero, but she'd done it. 22. A contestant on The Price is Right was playing Plinko again. She dropped her first chip and it landed in the $100 slot. She dropped her second chip and it landed in $0. She was doing terribly. On her third chip, she accidentally dropped it while pulling it out of the holder. It bounced off the board's edge in a way that wasn't supposed to happen, ricocheted weirdly, and somehow landed in the $10,000 center slot. Bob Barker said, "I don't think that's ever happened before. I'm not even sure that counts." Production reviewed it and decided that even though she'd accidentally dropped the chip, it had gone down the board, so it counted. Her accidental drop that shouldn't have worked won her $10,000. She'd won through the clumsiest possible chip drop that defied how Plinko is supposed to work. 23. A contestant on Family Feud was asked, "Name something you might buy that has a hole in it." He immediately said, "Girlfriend." Steve Harvey stopped the show and said, "What? Why would you buy a girlfriend with a hole in it?" The audience was dying laughing. The contestant tried to explain, girlfriends have holes, which made it worse. But then the board revealed girlfriend was actually the number 3 answer. Apparently, survey respondents had interpreted the question as things you buy for someone like a girlfriend. His bizarre answer had matched the survey despite meaning something completely different from what he'd intended. He won points with an answer that sounded terrible but happened to be on the board for different reasons. 24. A contestant on Jeopardy was in dead last place with $- going into Double Jeopardy. This should have eliminated her from competition, but both opponents kept getting questions wrong and losing money. Meanwhile, she started randomly guessing answers and getting them right through pure luck. She answered about 10 questions correctly in a row, with what she later admitted were complete guesses. By the end of Double Jeopardy, she'd come from behind to take the lead. In Final Jeopardy, she wrote a wrong answer but wagered conservatively, and both opponents also got it wrong and wagered poorly. She won Jeopardy despite having negative money at one point and getting Final Jeopardy wrong. Alex noted it was one of the strangest comebacks he'd seen. She'd won by lucky guessing in Double Jeopardy and conservative wagering on a wrong final answer. 25. A contestant on Wheel of Fortune spun the wheel and it landed on bankrupt. She lost all her money. Her opponent spun and also hit bankrupt. The third contestant spun and hit lose a turn. It came back to the first contestant who spun again and hit bankrupt again. This pattern continued for several minutes with everyone hitting bankrupt or lose a turn repeatedly. Finally, the first contestant solved the puzzle with $0 in earnings from that round. She won the round with $0 because the puzzle was solved even though no one had any money. She ended up winning the game because she accumulated money in other rounds. Her round win with $0 earnings became a memorable example of how unlucky everyone can be simultaneously. She'd won a round without earning a single dollar because solving matters even when the wheel destroys everyone's money. 26. A contestant on The Price is Right was playing a game where she had to pick the correct price from several options. She had no idea which price was right and just randomly pointed at one. It was wrong. She got another chance and randomly pointed again, also wrong. On her third and final try, she closed her eyes and randomly pointed without looking. Her random finger point landed on the correct price and she won a car. Bob Barker laughed and said, "That's how you win. Close your eyes and point." She'd won a car worth $30,000 by literally randomly pointing without looking. Her strategy of closing her eyes and pointing blindly had succeeded where thinking about it had failed. 27. A contestant on Who Wants to Be a Millionaire was on the $64,000 question about chemistry, which he knew nothing about. He said, "I'm going to use my 50-50. The lifeline left 2 answers, both chemical compounds he'd never heard of. He said, "These look like fake words. I'm going to use Ask the Audience." The audience voted 50-50. They were split evenly and clearly also had no idea. He said, "Well, this is useless. I guess I'll use Phone a Friend." His friend also had no idea and said, "Just pick one. I don't know chemistry." The contestant said, "I've used all my lifelines and gotten no help. I'm just going to pick B." B was correct. He'd won $64,000 despite all 3 lifelines providing 0 useful information. Regis laughed and said, "You used 3 lifelines to learn absolutely nothing and still got it right." His random guess after completely useless lifelines had somehow worked. 28. A contestant on Jeopardy buzzed in and said, "What is the thing, the place?" He clearly had no idea what the answer was and was just making sounds. Alex Trebek said, "I need you to be more specific." The contestant said, "What is Prussia?" which was a random guess at a country. Alex said, "That's correct." The contestant himself looked shocked that his random country guess had been right. He admitted after the show he'd just named a random historical place he'd heard of and had no idea why he said Prussia. His panicked random historical guess had happened to be the correct answer to a question he didn't understand. 29. A contestant on Family Feud was asked, "Name something that gets passed around." This is an easy question with many obvious answers. The contestant froze completely and after 10 seconds of silence said, "Kidney stone." Steve Harvey stopped the show. The audience was in shock at the bizarre answer. But then the board revealed that kidney stone was actually the number 8 answer with 2 points. 2 survey respondents had apparently said kidney stone when asked what gets passed around. The contestant's terrible answer had somehow been on the board. His family won the round despite his awful answer. The clip became viral for how unexpected and gross the answer was. He'd won points with one of the worst answers in Family Feud history that happened to match what 2 strange survey respondents had said. 30. A contestant on The Price is Right was in the showcase showdown facing another contestant. Both showcases were revealed. The first contestant bid $23,000 on a showcase worth $28,000. He was $5,000 under. The second contestant was supposed to bid on her showcase, which was worth $31,000. Instead, she got confused and bid on the other contestant's showcase by mistake. She bid $27,500 on the first showcase. Bob Barker said, "No, you're bidding on your showcase." She said, "Oh," and then bid $32,000 on her own showcase. Her showcase was worth $31,000, so she went over by $1,000 and lost. But wait, the first contestant was $5,000 under on his showcase, and the confused second contestant's mistaken bid of $27,500 on the first showcase was only $500 under. Production had to review the rules. They determined that her mistaken bid on the wrong showcase was closer than the actual contestant's bid, so she won both showcases by accidentally bidding on the wrong one, more accurately than the right person bid on the right one. Bob Barker said, "I don't think this has ever happened in the history of the show." She'd won by making a mistake that was technically more accurate than the correct attempt. 31. A contestant on Wheel of Fortune was playing a puzzle in the event category. The board showed Dariki Mawat with just a few letters filled in. She had one letter showing, B. She spun and called the letter Z, a terrible choice that's almost never in puzzles. Incredibly, there was a Z in the puzzle. She spun again and called Q, another terrible letter choice. There was somehow a Q in the puzzle too. She spun again and called X, the worst letter in the English language for Wheel of Fortune. Against all odds, there was an X in the puzzle. Pat Sajak joked, "Are you just calling random letters?" She then solved quiz competition. Her strategy of calling the worst letters in the alphabet had somehow worked because the puzzle contained rare letters. She won that round by doing the opposite of good strategy and getting lucky that the puzzle was unusual. 32. A contestant on Jeopardy was playing terribly and had $200 going into Final Jeopardy versus opponents with $15,000 and $18,000. The Final Jeopardy category was literature. All 3 contestants wrote answers. The leader bet everything and wrote, "What is Moby Dick?" which was wrong. He dropped to $0. The second place contestant also bet big and wrote, "What is the Great Gatsby?" also wrong, dropping to $4,000. The last place contestant had written, "What is a book?" which wasn't even a real answer to the specific question asked. But she'd bet $0, staying at $200. She won Jeopardy with $200 by writing a nonsense answer and betting nothing while both opponents destroyed themselves with bad wagers. Alex said, "You've won with $200 and an answer that wasn't really an answer." She'd won the dumbest way possible and by not even trying to answer the question while opponents overthought it. 33. A contestant on Who Wants to Be a Millionaire reached the $125,000 question about European history. She said, "I know nothing about European history. I'm going to walk away with $64,000. Regis said, "Are you sure? You still have lifelines." She said, "No, I'm walking." She walked away. The question was then revealed and Regis read the 4 answer choices. She immediately said, "Oh, I know that one. The answer is C." Regis revealed that C was indeed correct. She'd walked away from a question she could have answered correctly and cost herself $61,000 by giving up too early. But wait, the next question, $250,000, was then revealed to show what she would have faced, and she admitted, "I would have had no idea on that one." By walking away from a question she could have answered, she'd accidentally saved herself from facing a question she would have gotten wrong and lost money on. Her premature quitting had actually saved her from losing money on the next question. Her dumb decision to walk away from a question she knew had accidentally protected her from losing even more money later. 34. A contestant on The Price is Right was playing a game that required simple addition. She had to add 3 prices together to reach a total. The prices were $300 + $450 plus $250. She pulled out her phone to use the calculator. Bob Barker said, "You can't use your phone." She said, "But I can't do math." Security had to take her phone. She stood there trying to add the numbers in her head for over a minute. Finally, she guessed $100. The actual answer was $1,000. She was wrong. But her opponent then guessed $800, which was even more wrong. Since the contestant was closer to the correct price, she won by default even though her math was terrible. Bob joked, "Math is clearly not your strong suit, but you're better at it than your opponent." She'd won by being less bad at simple addition than her competitor. 35. A contestant on Family Feud was asked, "Name a part of your body that's bigger than it was when you were a baby." This is an easy question. Any body part could be correct. The contestant said, "Penis." Steve Harvey stopped everything and said, "On second thought, that might not be bigger for everyone." The audience was dying laughing at the inappropriate answer, but the board revealed penis private parts was the Tamarita answer with 25 points. Apparently, a lot of survey respondents had given that answer. His crude answer had been one of the top responses. His family won the round thanks to his shocking answer. The clip went viral and became one of the most watched Family Feud moments ever. He'd won with an answer that was inappropriate, but happened to be exactly what many people had honestly said in the survey. 36. A contestant on Jeopardy buzzed in before Alex Trebek finished reading a clue. The clue was "This 1960s band." And before Alex could finish, the contestant buzzed and yelled, "What is the Beatles?" Alex said, "I hadn't finished the question. The clue was this 1960s band had a hit song called Good Vibrations." The answer was the Beach Boys, not the Beatles. The contestant's early buzz-in and wrong answer should have lost him money. But then judges reviewed and noted that Alex had deviated from the written clue by pausing, which may have confused timing. They gave the contestant another chance to answer the complete question. He answered, "What is the Beach Boys?" and got credit. He'd been saved from a wrong answer by a technicality in how the clue was read. His impulsive wrong guess had been erased by judge intervention. 37. A contestant on Wheel of Fortune was playing the bonus round, the final puzzle for $100,000. She chose her letters and the board showed a few letters in the puzzle. She had 10 seconds to solve. She stood there silently for 9 seconds, clearly having no idea. With 1 second left, she randomly blurted out, "Championship." The answer was championship. Pat Sajak was stunned. She'd solved it with literally 1 second remaining after standing silent for 9 seconds. She won $100,000 by randomly shouting a word at the last possible second. She admitted, "I had no idea. I just said the first word that came to my mind." Her last-second random shout had been correct and won her a massive prize. 38. A contestant on The Price is Right was playing the race car game where you try to price 3 items correctly to make your car advance. He priced all 3 items incorrectly. He was wrong on every single one. His car didn't move at all. His opponent then played and also got all 3 items wrong. Neither car had moved. They played again with different items. The contestant again got all 3 wrong. His opponent also got all 3 wrong. This continued for several rounds with both contestants being perfectly wrong on everything. Finally, Bob Barker said, "This is taking forever. We're going to give you both one more chance, and whoever gets at least 1 item correct wins." The contestant randomly guessed prices and got 1 item correct purely by luck. He won the game by finally getting 1 single item right after getting everything else wrong. Bob said, "I've never seen anyone win by being slightly less wrong than someone who was perfectly wrong." 39. A contestant on Who Wants to Be a Millionaire was on the $16,000 question about mathematics. The question involved calculating something. She said, "I'm terrible at math. I'm going to use my phone a friend and call my husband." She called her husband and read him the question. Her husband said, "I don't know math either, but if I had to guess, I'd say A?" She said, "Okay, I'll trust you," and locked in A. A was correct. Later, at the $32,000 question about history, she again used phone a friend to call her husband. He again had no idea but randomly guessed C. She locked in C and it was correct. At $64,000, she called her husband again. He guessed DD was correct. She won $64,000 by her husband, making 3 random guesses in a row that all happened to be right. Regis said, "Your husband is the luckiest guesser I've ever seen." She'd won tens of thousands of dollars because her husband randomly guessed 3 straight questions correctly. 40. A contestant on Jeopardy accidentally buzzed in when he meant to scratch his face. The buzzer was very sensitive and his hand slipped. Alex said yes? The contestant looked confused and said, "Oh, I didn't mean to buzz in." Alex said, "Well, you did, so you need to answer." The contestant, forced to answer, said, "What is, Canada?" It was a random guess. He had no idea what the question was about. Alex said, "That's correct." The contestant had won money by accidentally buzzing in and randomly guessing a country. He won that game partly due to his accidental buzz-in that forced him to randomly guess correctly. 41. A contestant on Family Feud was asked, "Name something people take with them to the beach." He said, "Beached whale." Steve Harvey said, "What? Why would someone take a beached whale to the beach?" The audience was confused and laughing. The contestant tried to explain, a dead whale, which made it worse. But somehow, whale marine life was the Najarn 7 answer with 3 points. A few survey respondents had said they bring sea life to look at or study. His terrible answer had partially matched. His family won the round despite his absurd answer. The clip became viral for being one of the weirdest answers ever given. He'd won points by saying something that made no sense, but technically matched what a few respondents had somehow answered. 42. A contestant on The Price is Right was playing the Showcase Showdown and needed to spin exactly 1 Royales to win. She spun and got 0.75. On her second spin, she needed 0.25 exactly to get the perfect 1 point Royales. She spun and the wheel went around and around and started to slow down. It was approaching the 0.25 mark. But then someone in the audience sneezed very loudly, startling the contestant. She flinched, and her flinch vibrated the stage slightly, which moved the wheel just enough that it landed on exactly $0.25 instead of going past it. She'd gotten the perfect dollar because someone in the audience sneezed at the exact right moment to vibrate the wheel into the right position. Bob Barker joked, "That sneeze was worth $1,000. She won the bonus through the most absurd luck involving another person's sneeze affecting her wheel spin. 43. A contestant on Wheel of Fortune was playing a puzzle with the category person. The board showed with several letters filled in, including F, L, R, M, N. She had enough information to solve, but clearly didn't know the answer. On her turn, instead of calling a letter, she randomly said, I'd like to solve federal informant. This made no sense. Why would federal informant be in the person category on a family game show? Pat Sajak said, "No, I'm sorry." Her opponent then solved it correctly as former princess. But then the contestant complained that her answer could have technically been correct because federal informants are persons. Vanna White had to explain that the specific person being referenced was a former princess, not just any type of person. The contestant had tried to argue her way into a win with a technically person but wrong answer. She lost that round, but the argument became a funny moment. Her attempt to rules lawyer her wrong answer into being right had failed, but showed absurd reasoning. 44. A contestant on Jeopardy was in Final Jeopardy tied with another contestant at $12,000 each. The third contestant had $14,000. The Final Jeopardy category was U.S. presidents. The leading contestant wagered everything and wrote a wrong answer, dropping to $0. The second contestant also wagered big and wrote a wrong answer, dropping to $2,000. The tied contestant had written, "What is a president?" which wasn't even an answer to the specific question asked, but she'd wagered only $1. She had 11,999 remaining, which was more than the $2,000 the other remaining contestant had. She'd won Jeopardy by writing a non-answer and betting almost nothing while everyone else imploded. Alex said, "You won by, I'm not even sure what to call this. You didn't answer the question but bet conservatively enough that it didn't matter." She'd won through the dumbest possible strategy, not answering the question while others overthought theirs. 45. And finally, a contestant on Who Wants to Be a Millionaire was on the $500,000 question. The question was about quantum physics. She said, "I've used all my lifelines and I have no idea what quantum physics is, but I've come this far, so I'm going to guess." She had 4 options and closed her eyes and randomly pointed at the screen without looking. Her finger landed on B. She said, "I'm going with B, final answer." Regis built up suspense and said, "For $500,000, you randomly pointed at B. Let's see. You're right." She won $500,000 by literally closing her eyes and pointing at the screen randomly. Regis said, "That's the first time in millionaire history someone has won this much by closing their eyes and pointing." She started crying and said, "I literally didn't even read the answers. I just pointed." She'd won $500,000 through the purest luck possible, closing her eyes and randomly pointing at a multiple choice answer without even reading the options. She later admitted she'd thought about going for the million, but decided to walk away with $500,000 earned by random pointing. Her finger-pointing win became legendary as one of the luckiest moments in game show history. She'd earned more money by random pointing than most people earn in 10 years of work. The brutal truth about game show wins is that sometimes they have nothing to do with knowledge, skill, or strategy, and everything to do with pure dumb luck, other contestants making worse mistakes, or technical glitches working in your favor. These contestants won by guessing randomly, by opponents destroying themselves, by accidents, by misunderstandings that somehow worked out, and by being slightly less wrong than everyone else. These wins prove that game shows designed to reward intelligence and quick thinking can sometimes reward the exact opposite. Random guesses work 25% of the time on multiple choice questions. Bad wagering by opponents can hand you victories. Technical errors can give you second chances, and sometimes saying the dumbest thing imaginable happens to be what survey respondents said. The real lesson isn't that you should try these strategies, it's that these people got incredibly lucky in ways that can't be replicated. For every person who won by randomly guessing, thousands lost by randomly guessing. These are the exceptions that prove the rule that game shows usually reward actual knowledge. But when dumb luck strikes, it strikes big. And these contestants walked away with cars, vacations, and hundreds of thousands of dollars for essentially doing nothing right. Subscribe if you want to remember that sometimes being lucky is better than being smart. That game shows can reward the wrong people for the wrong reasons, and that if you ever get on a game show, you should probably try to actually know the answers rather than relying on the kind of astronomical luck these people experienced.